Well, look, I'm just happy to be here tonight. As many of you know, I'm an open book, so I'm just going to let it all hang out, all right? Not literally, figuratively. But what I want to talk about is, overcoming obstacles and challenges as an essential part of growth. And in the past year, I've experienced a lot of personal growth, catalyzed primarily because I've got a business and I'm a business owner. But more than just overcoming those challenges, I've learned that the essential first step in doing so is in embracing the reality of the struggles that we're presented with rather than running from them. The Bible in the book of Romans puts it this way: we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know they help us develop endurance. And that's kind of been the theme for me this year. I've kind of felt that struggle, asked the tough questions around that, overcame the obstacle, grew from the process, and then it just seemed to repeat itself. But, obviously there's a lot of good things that come out of going through this process. My business has nearly doubled this year. Our average monthly gross has increased 85% over the last 12 months versus the previous 12-month time frame. We've seen an immense increase in recognition in our community because we've intentionally involved ourselves in several big community events. We were number one in the country, as Sean pointed out, for raising more than $25,000 for the boot campaign through our Push-Ups for Charity event. We also partnered with a local nonprofit adoption agency and helped them raise over $17,000 for their organization called 200 Million Flowers. And I just found out a couple days ago that we were recommended for an award in our community for the highest community impact. Our Facebook page has grown from 297 at the beginning of this year to well over 1,200. Our list started at less than 1,100 this year, and it's well over 2,200 now. But to only share the good with you would not be reality. The truth is, the reality is, running a business is hard, okay? And I've, had some struggles this year. My net profit isn't what I would want it to be. Some months are good, some months are bad. I even have negative net profit months. Let's face it, business isn't always sunshine and rainbows, okay? And our hard work doesn't always produce mythical results, right? And that's why I want to talk about this theme of a struggle to overcome an obstacle and the growth that transpires as a result. Now, my first area of struggle was in January with our Raise the Rates campaign. And after going through the Found Money program, immediately following mega training last year, I realized that my prices didn't really generate enough profit to support the business where it was at. So I made some big changes. Now, this obviously didn't sit well with a lot of long-term clients that we've had. They looked at me as getting greedy. The reality was they just were upset with the method that I used. They were much more likely to want me to give them a phone call or sit down with them in person. And we ended up losing some of those clients. But if I didn't do it, the business wouldn't have survived. It was the right thing to do, even though it was difficult to go through it at the time. And I got to learn a valuable lesson on how my clients like me to communicate with them. Another area of struggle for me this year, early on, was not really having much balance in my life. I was working so heavily on these big community projects, several of which I didn't mention, and I was finding that I had less time for more personal aspects of my life. So with NPE's help, I developed a calendar and blocked out my top priorities first and started living by it, starting with my devotional time and time spent in my men's groups, which helped feed me spiritually. I blocked out my workouts, and I hired my trainer, Daniel, to literally whip my butt and hold me accountable and keep me consistent. I have an entire half day blocked out where I get to do whatever I want to do that does not relate to business. It's my own little personal Clint date, okay? But most importantly, I blocked out some time with me and my wife so that we had a date night every single week. Now, I tell you all this because even though I was doing some great things, I found myself missing out on doing a lot of the little things that help keep you going. And so that resulted in some decline in some cash flow and some revenue. And by midsummer, I was really questioning my ability as a business owner. When you've worked hard for 4 years and you realize you're just not there yet, and worse, you realize how far you have to go, it can be a very frustrating and defeating feeling. I even told Sean that I wanted out of the fitness business altogether. And I'm telling you this because I want you to know that if you struggle, you are not alone. So with Sean's encouragement, I dove back into the dream lifestyle exercise, and it spurred some really big questions that I needed to answer. Questions like, why am I even doing this? And what do I really want for my life? And am I truly doing what makes me happy? So during this 6-week period from mid-June to the end of July, I went through this deep thinking and internal assessment period. And I got to tell you, it sucked, okay? It wasn't fun. But it was the very thing that forced me to grow. Like I said earlier, the hardest thing to do in life is look yourself in the mirror. But when I did, I learned a lot about myself, and I was forced to face my weaknesses. And by far, my number one weakness has got to be delegation. And there's really 2 reasons for that. Number one, I struggle with trust. Okay, trust is a hard thing for me. It comes from how I grew up, being in a split family and having to take care of a lot of things at a younger age. But I've acknowledged that this year, and I've really worked intentionally on addressing it. So I've forced myself to trust my staff with more and bigger projects, responsibilities, and tasks. The other reason delegation was tough for me is because I realized, or I really hadn't taken responsibility for, putting things in place that would make my staff successful. So what I've done is create some stronger operating procedures. I made the job descriptions much clearer. I clearly communicated my expectations and outcomes for my staff so that everything would work better. The other area of weakness that I have is I tend to react in the extremes, okay? Business is either on the brink of disaster or it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? And the truth is, good and bad are present all the time in everything. So by identifying my weaknesses and working on them, it allowed me to grow as a business owner and as a person. I realized that if I left these questions unanswered, or worse, avoided them due to fear, that it would just put me in this perpetual downfall of self-loathing and self-defeat. But by diving in and fleshing out my deepest desires for what I want for myself and for my business, it helped me realize that my business is the vehicle for me doing exactly what I want to do. And in most cases, I'm currently doing what I want to do because of my business. Now, I know we all say that our business should be that vehicle, but for me, it just hadn't clicked yet. Or rather, I hadn't really taken responsibility for putting the pieces in place for the business to be that vehicle. So what I did is I updated my organizational chart and job descriptions so that I could finally put those pieces in place and move myself completely out of the business. I promoted my lead trainer, Laura, to a director of operations role. I moved my admin, Elizabeth, to a marketing assistant position in charge of client relations and social media. I gave the trainers updated job descriptions with clearly communicated expectations and outcomes that I had for them. I hired a new admin to take some of the duties off of Elizabeth so that she could be freed up to help me generate marketing faster and better. I'm currently working on hiring a personal assistant at Sean's recommendation, and I've passed off all my accounts payable to my bookkeeper and accountant. So I've done a lot of good things here, and it's helped me realize my vision, and it's never been clearer than it is right now. And this is my vision for my business in the next 6 months to a year. Now, I know it's probably going to need some tweaking and some adjustment, but it's going to evolve. The point is that as a result of working with Sean and Steve Wilkinghoff and NPE, I now have a plan in place, and I'm working that plan to make this happen. So what have I learned? I've learned that I've come a long way in 4 years. And those of you who know me know it's very difficult for me to pat myself on the back. But I've realized this: I don't want to quit too soon because I might miss out on what the next 4 years has to offer. And Paul Fetter's story reminds me that I don't want to miss out on what 25 years in this business could do for me and my family. I also realize that struggle is inevitable. We all struggle. It's what forces us to adapt, evolve, and grow. You just have to be willing to embrace it. You also have to have lifelines and be willing to reach out for them. The VIP community this summer was my lifeline. I shared a lot of my struggles and what was going on, and they helped support me. The other thing I learned is that nobody can do this work for you. You just have to be willing to fight for what you believe in and for what you want in your life. Now, through all the struggle and the work and the time investment, I I really have had some great opportunities to get away for long periods of time while the business stayed on course. In February, Jennifer and I went to San Francisco to spend a week. We saw the sights, we went to Napa for a day, and we got to hang out with fellow VIPers Audra Baker and Kristen Nolan. In April, we went to Vegas for 5 days to celebrate my brother's return from his year-long deployment in Afghanistan. This June, we went to Disney World for an entire week prior to the VIP spring training. And Jennifer and I celebrated our 10-year anniversary with our first ever trip to the Magical Kingdom. But most recently, I went to Idaho for 8 days on a rafting trip. And we spent 6 days on the river with no watch, no cell phone, no connection to the outside world. Just a bag of clothes, some personal hygiene items, and 4 kooky guides providing us some direction and insight. You know, sleeping under the stars and experiencing the mystery and the wonder and the beauty of God was really healing for my spirit. Not to mention a complete emotional and mental recharging of my life battery. And the cool thing is that the river presented a great metaphor for life, and as business as well. You know, life is continually rushing by, and you don't know what's up around the next bend. You can stand on the shore watching it go by in fear of risking more than you want to lose. You can swim against the current or try to swim against the current in hopes of controlling how far you want to go. Or you can jump in and go with the flow. Now, I've done all three in my life, but far less of the latter of those three. So on the second day of our trip, I decided to go down the river in a single-man raft known as a ducky. And the first rapid that we came to was called Harvey Wallbanger. And the guides were instructing us to make sure we stayed to the left so that we wouldn't get pinned up against the rocks on the right. But if you got too far to the left, you miss out on all the fun the rapids provide. And I accidentally went too far to the left. And I was disappointed in myself. And I remember telling myself in that moment, Clint, you need to risk more. So as we approached the next rapid, which was a class 3, I noticed that the other rafts ahead of me were going to the right of what's known as Demon's Drop. So I was like, I'm going right down the middle. As soon as I cleared the drop, I was flipped out of the raft and into the raging water. But interestingly enough, I didn't panic. All I heard in my head was the voice of the guide that taught us self-rescue technique. So I pulled my knees up into my chest so I wouldn't get a foot stuck under a rock. I found the raft, was able to get up on top of it, eventually flipped it back over, and climbed back in. Now the adrenaline's just coursing through my body at this time. And what seemed like a minute or 2 minutes in the water was really only about 15 or 20 seconds. And as I turned to the group that I came with, they were cheering. And they were applauding not only my ability to get back in the raft, but my willingness to take a risk and not play it safe. And over the next 4 days, it's amazing what that experience taught me. I learned that risk is an essential element of experiencing the best that life has to offer. I learned the importance of instruction from an expert. You know, life, and therefore business, really is like a river. Sometimes it's raging with waves of uncertainty, turmoil, and struggle. Other times it's a 20-mile-per-hour headwind that you can either allow to push you back, or you can paddle through and fight to keep moving forward. And sometimes it's calm, allowing you to recharge and reflect on the trials that you just went through. Whatever part of the river you're in right now, it's vital that you see risk as an opportunity to grow. Life is too short to make excuses, stand on the shoreline, or try to control every aspect. Life should be lived, not managed. So as I've learned, if you've been standing on the shore watching the river of life go by, it's time to jump in. You may need a guide to help you navigate that river and teach you the skills necessary to get the most out of that river. The point is, get in the river. Start living life. And yes, you may fail if you take that risk, as I did with the rapid. But what you learn from taking that risk will propel you further than you ever thought imaginable. It will equip you with the ability to live a fuller, more successful life. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.